This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
Algeria is celebrating tomorrow National Student Day, commemorating the 68th anniversary of the historic strike of May 19, 1956, against the backdrop of good educational performance indicators of the Algerian University. The Minister of Energy and Mines, Mohamed Al-Qab, has affirmed in Sorrento, Italy, that Algeria was working hard to strengthen the Trans-Saharan gas pipeline project linking Nigeria to the northern shore of the Mediterranean via Algeria and Niger. As the first delivery of humanitarian aid has started in the Gaza Strip, violent fighting has been raging in Rafah amid bombardments targeting the southern city. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. Joining me today, my colleague Mariam Bershi in the presentation of this news bulletin. First in our news, the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, has congratulated the Mouloudia of Algiers club after winning its 8th title of Algerian Championship of the first professional football league. The President of the Republic wrote on his official X page, "Congratulations to Mouloudia, Dean of Algerian clubs, for its 18th Algerian Championship title in its history. Congratulations to its many supporters and its technical staff. You fully deserve your title." End of quote. Algeria is celebrating tomorrow the National Student Day, commemorating the 68th anniversary of the historic strike of May 19, 1956, against the backdrop of good educational performance indicators of the Algerian University, which now assumes new roles, enabling it to be a locomotive of the socio-economic development efforts undertaken by the country. The reforms carried out in recent years by the sector of higher education and scientific research have made it possible, as part of the new national strategy whose foundations were laid by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, to connect the university to its economic environment in addition to its adaptation to the requirements of the national market and to its orientation towards innovation, creation and entrepreneurship, while improving its performance through its openness to international research centers and establishments. These efforts come within the framework of the implementation of a proactive vision, setting the university as a locomotive for the development of the national economy, thus making of the Algerian students and young people the life forces of today's Algeria, which is strong in its national commitment, creative and innovative capacities, and its success in terms of acquisition of scientific knowledge and mastery of modern technologies, as stated on many occasions by the President of the Republic. The sector is also continuing to implement training adapted to the new socio-economic needs, such as artificial intelligence, robotics, the medicine of the future, applied mathematics, nanotechnologies, and the construction of electric vehicles, with the aim of supporting the state's orientation to encouraging local production. The sector is achieving a qualitative leap in terms of digitalization of educational scientific activities and management of university services in anticipation of the transition towards a fourth generation university interconnected and open to the socio-economic environment. Now, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Mr. Ahmed Attaf, has received a phone call from his Serbian counterpart, Mr. Marko Duric. On the occasion, the two parties examined the historic bilateral relations and the perspectives to strengthen them, in addition to the political questions of common interest, which are enlisted on the UN or on the United Nations agenda. And the Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Lounas Magraman, has chaired a meeting at the headquarters of Algerian Embassy in France with the Algerian Consul Generals and consuls accredited to European and Northern American countries. The meeting, which was also attended by the Algerian Ambassador to France, was devoted to the following up on the implementation of the instructions of President Abdelmadjid Tebboune regarding the arrangements to be made so as to improve consular services for the Algerian community living abroad. Let's listen to Mr. Magraman.
Much happiness for the Algerian nationals who currently find in our consulates abroad all the facilitation, availability, the commitment of our consular agents, and at their head the consuls who strive on a daily basis to meet the expectations of our community.
That was the Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Lounas Maghraman. Over to you, Miriam.
The Minister of Energy and Mines, Mohamed Arkab, has affirmed in Sorrento, Italy, that Algeria was working hard to strengthen the Trans-Saharan gas pipeline project linking Nigeria to the northern shore of the Mediterranean via Algeria and Niger. In a speech delivered during the third edition of the International Forum entitled Towards the South and the European Strategy for a New Geopolitical, Economic and Social-Cultural Season in the Mediterranean, Mr. Arkab stressed that this project will make a major contribution to Europe's natural gas supplies and will thus strengthen the energy security of the northern shore of the Mediterranean and will also support the socio-economic development and transit countries. Meanwhile, Mr. Arkab indicated Algeria will take part in the strategic debate with its European partners on the creation of the Southern Corridor H2 to transport renewable hydrogen produced in Algeria to Germany via Tunisia, Italy and Austria. The Algerian minister added that this mega project requires the establishment of solid partnerships between the public and private sectors, noting that this cooperation will make it possible to mobilize the large partnership investments required for the development of production, infrastructures, storage and transport of hydrogen. In the same context, Mr. Arkab highlighted Algeria's determination to become the main supplier in the field of hydrogen, given the enormous capacities and advantages it has and which allow it to occupy a pioneering position in this field, emphasizing the importance of the national energy model currently being prepared. Meanwhile, the Minister of Energy and Mines, Mohamed Arkab, examined in Sorrento, Italy, with the Executive Director of the Italian company Edison, Nicolas Monti, the prospects of bilateral cooperation on the sidelines of the third edition of the International Forum. The two parties reviewed during the meeting, which took place in the presence of the CEO of the Sonatrach Group, Rashid Hashishi, an executive from the Ministry of Cooperation and Partnership Relations between Sonatrach Groups and Edison, and the prospect for cooperation and investment in structural projects in the field of energy in Algeria, particularly in the field of exporting natural gas to Italy, and the possibility of electrical interconnection between Algeria and Italy, especially on account of Algeria's big renewable energy potential. Mr. Arkab and Mr. Monti also discussed other aspects of cooperation, such as training, exchange of expertise, and technology transfer. Over to you, Mohammed.
And the Speaker of the Interparliamentary Union, Toulia Axon, has held the Algerian parliamentary contribution to the action of the Union during a working session held in Geneva, Switzerland, with the Speaker of the National People's Assembly, Ibrahim Boughali. A communique issued by the APN indicated that during the meeting, the two parties evoked the various challenges facing the world today, underlining the imperative to combine efforts to face them. The meeting was an opportunity for Toulia Axon, the Speaker of the IPU, also Speaker of the Tanzanian Parliament, to welcome the active Algerian parliamentary contribution within the Union, particularly through the sharing of its pioneering experience in the fight against terrorism and extremism. And Algeria has affirmed in the capital of Equatorial Guinea, Malabo, that it will remain a committed partner supporting all initiatives aimed at strengthening cooperation and economic integration in Africa. A communique issued by the Ministry of Commerce and Export Promotion indicated that the declaration was made during Algeria's participation in the fourth ordinary session of the Specialized Technical Committee of the African Union for Trade, Tourism, Industry and Mineral Resources held recently. On the occasion, the Algerian delegation, led by the head of the cabinet of the Ministry of Trade and Export Promotion, Souheila Abelash, made valuable presentations for the achievement of the objectives set on the AU agenda. Addressing the meeting, she hailed the pioneering Algerian experience in this field, startups, e-commerce, the legal framework of free zones, the support of small and medium-sized businesses and enterprises, the green economy, as well as the carbon-related border settlement mechanism adopted by the EU. Abelash affirmed that Algeria will remain a partner committed to supporting all initiatives aimed at strengthening cooperation and economic integration in Africa, calling on African countries to work together to ensure a better future for or a better future for the people of the African continent and to promote continental trade. Over to you, Miriam.
As the first delivery of humanitarian aid has started in the Gaza Strip, violent fighting has been taking place in Rafah amid bombardments targeting the southern city. Palestinian sources said several people were killed and others wounded in the bombardments that hit a camp of displaced in the eastern and southeastern part of Rafah. The operation was launched recently by the Israeli occupation army despite warnings by several countries that an assault on Rafah would lead to a disastrous humanitarian situation. This came as fighting continues in the refugee camp of Jabalia north of Gaza, which has been massively devastated by the Israeli attacks. Meanwhile, the funneling of humanitarian aid started via a maritime corridor to provide food, water to the distressed population in Gaza. The deputy spokesman of the UN Secretary-General, Farhan Haq, stressed that the importance of opening of crossing points to allowing aid to Gaza.
After months of discussions with all relevant authorities, the UN has agreed to support in receiving and arranging for the dispatch of aid into Gaza from the floating dock, as long as it respects the neutrality and independence of humanitarian operations. Given the immense needs in Gaza, the floating dock is intended to supplement existing land crossings of aid into Gaza, including Rafah, Kerem Shalom, and Erez. It is not meant to replace any crossings. On Friday, the first trucks carrying humanitarian assistance have moved ashore on the floating dock in Gaza. This is an ongoing multinational effort to deliver additional aid to Palestinians in Gaza through a maritime corridor that is entirely humanitarian in nature and will involve aid commodities donated by a number of countries and humanitarian organizations.
Meanwhile, Algeria and Slovenia have called for the holding of a meeting in 2 days' time of the UN Security Council to examine the situation in the Gaza Strip. In Venezuela, Venezuela has reiterated its historic position in favor of the exercise by the Sahrawi people of its inalienable right to self-determination in accordance with the UN Security Council resolutions. Addressing the UN Special Committee on Decolonization held in Caracas, the Venezuelan delegation expressed its regret that the Sahrawi people have not been able neither to decide on their legitimate national aspirations nor to exercise their right to self-determination. The delegation also regretted that in more than 30 years after the creation of the United Nations mission for the organization of a referendum in Western Sahara, MINURSO, it is also not unable to fully carry out its mandate aimed at enabling the Sahrawi people to fulfill the inalienable right to decide for their own fate. Over to you, Mohammed.
And in Sudan, the rapid paramilitary forces or support forces have said that they are ready to open safe passages for the civilians wishing to flee Al-Fashir in Darfur, which is in the middle of the fighting, which has been raging for more than a year now after the start of the war in Sudan. For weeks, the international community has warned against an imminent disaster in Al-Fashir. The rapid parliamentary support forces expressed their will to help the citizens by opening safe passages for them to leave voluntarily to other areas of their choice. The rapid forces called on the citizens of Al-Fashir to avoid combat zones and areas likely to be targeted by the air forces and not to respond to malicious calls to mobilize the population and drag them into the war. Let's recall that 1.5 million people, including 800,000 displaced, are living in the city, which has been relatively spared until now, thanks to an agreement noticed or negotiated between local armed groups and the rapid paramilitary support forces. And in Afghanistan, at least 3 Spanish tourists and 1 Afghan were killed in an attack carried out in a market in the touristic city of Bamyan, in the center part of the country. The Interior Ministry said that 8 other people, including 4 foreigners, were wounded in the attack, and it stressed that 7 suspects were arrested. And still in Afghanistan, 50 people were killed in new flash floods that hit the southern province of Ghor. The number of people missing is still unknown. More than 2,000 homes were destroyed so far and thousands damaged by the floods. Let's recall that over 300 people died last week in the northern part of the country due to flash floods. And with this last piece of news, we come to the end of this news bulletin. Time now for our weekly program, starting with my colleague Jamal Silmani with a cultural program on the Muhammad or artistic miniature. It will be followed by another program devoted to the park, the National Park of Tassili, Niger, with our colleague Hannah Delil. As for me and my colleague, will be again tomorrow here for a fresh edition of our news bulletin in English. Thank you and goodbye.
Welcome to your weekly program, Destination Algeria. I'm Jamal Semeni. There are a number of great destinations in Algeria just waiting to be discovered. A curious mixture of cultures and influences. Algeria has something interesting to see in just about every city. The country is also the first largest on the African continent, so you can be sure that there are plenty of towns and cities to visit. Let's visit Algeria's fascinating destinations, you and I, together.